Hi, everyone, and welcome to Small Talk with the Etsy Collective, which is a session in which we bring you closer to change makers and industry experts for insights and a lot of inspiration. I'm Sunanda, and I'm the PR and marketing lead for Etsy in India. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome Ms. Srila Chatterjee to this session. She is the co-founder and curator of Baro. Welcome to this session, ma'am.
Thank you.
She's an entrepreneur. Thank you. She's an entrepreneur who was a filmmaker for 25 years before she decided to follow her passion for art and design. And then she opened Baro, which is an experiential furniture and art store in Mumbai. I think that's such a brave move, and we are really looking forward to listening to your insights today. Of course, this session will be moderated by the amazing Supriya Dravid. Supriya, as you know, is the former editor of Elle India, and under her directive, the magazine became more inclusive and diverse in its focus and coverage, becoming the only magazine to feature global icons like Oprah Winfrey and Dan France on its covers. Before Elle, Supriya had stints at Harper's Bazaar and India Today. She is also the author of A Cool Dark Place, which is a novel of fiction that was published by Penguin Random House. Welcome, Supriya. It's really great to see you again.
Thank you, Sunanda.
Before we start the conversation, I wanted to inform Srila, Supriya, and everybody in the audience that our beloved Etsy Collective, which we now call Small Talk with the Etsy Collective, our weekly meetup with creative and inspiring people, has completed 2 years and 100 sessions. And we have a tiny little video to celebrate this milestone. So I would request Radhika to play it for the audience.
Hello everybody, we have completed 2 years of Etsy Collective. It has just been an incredible way for people to connect. Etsy's mission is keep commerce human, and I believe that Etsy Collective has been able to work towards that mission and serve that mission in a very effective manner. Here's to 2 years of Etsy Collective and many more to come. I believe that this is absolutely the best platform to keep commerce human in addition to being online on Etsy.com.
Congratulations, Etsy, on completing 2 years of the collective.
This is an amazing milestone. Kudos to you guys. Congratulations.
Has to be the first collective which we had in Bikaner House. I was invited to the event and I absolutely loved it.
I so vividly remember that when I walked into the room, there was so much energy, there was so much enthusiasm. That itself became such an amazing memory for me.
The DIY session at the end of the workshop, I think it's really a stress buster that you get involved, you learn, and you leave the session with a souvenir.
There's so much to learn from so many creative geniuses.
I'm sure it adds a lot of value and provides a lot of insight into the many facets of this industry.
Etsy India team really took on the challenge of making the lockdown successful and informative and educative for all their Etsy sellers.
The entire Etsy team, keep rocking, you guys are doing great.
And thank you for keeping commerce human.
Srila, just before we start, I'm just going to give our viewers a little bit of a bio. I'll try to concise everything in one format to introduce you. Srila Chatterjee is a multi-hyphenated creative force. She's a co-founder and curator of Baro and the founder of Baro Market. She helmed the country's leading production house, Highlight Films, for over 25 demanding years as a producer in advertising and film. Yet, despite it all, she somehow made time for all her passions, ranging from art to design to dogs. Srila also curated the Kala Ghoda Arts Festival in its early years and co-founded Blue Frog, the iconic music space. When Srila started Baro in 2017, along with business partner and fellow design aficionado and art director, Siddharth Sirohi, she found very quickly that they were much more than just creating a furniture brand. Baro became symbolic of things that the two of them believed in handmade, in being local but global, in being original, in never bothering with trends, in quality that should not be compromised. Thank you, Srila, for joining us.
Thank you, Supriya. It's lovely to be able to chat with you.
I'm going to first talk to you about your life pre-pandemic, because I know Baro was such an experiential place. And you worked for over 25 years as a producer. You ran Highlight Films before you decided to follow your passion for art and design. And then you eventually opened up Baro. What finally drew you to set up Baro with Siddharth? I mean, a space like that doesn't come together overnight. I'm sure there's a lot of things that have been brewing to create such an eclectic space.
Well, we were lucky in that we had 2 years of what I call an experiment. When we decided to try this, it was, Highlight was still functioning. That was the production company. And we had a really nice space that was in another of the compounds, the mill compounds in Mahalakshmi Mill. And what we did was we just got rid of all the furniture in the film office. And it was a very interesting space because it had high ceiling, strange little attics. And we put in our furniture. And for 2 years, it was this little store where we continued our film business, but it was using all this furniture. And in those 2 years of experiment, we figured something must be going right because we didn't owe any money. We hadn't put any money in, it was working. And so it was really a question of either you go forward or you stop. What do you want to do? And so we elected to go forward, and to go forward meant doing it properly, getting a bigger, better space, blah, blah, blah. And I think a lot of what it became was a function of two things. One of my understanding in those 2 years that even if somebody came to buy a chair, what they were looking for was more than just a chair. They were looking for a story that they could take and put into their own home. And if you showed them that story or started telling it, they got fascinated, and you could bring in lots of things. And I just haven't had a natural inclination to a lot of things that weren't easily available in most places in Bombay. And the second part that was important was that we moved to this really lovely space. It was derelict when we found it, but it was large and it was affordable only because it was derelict. And that kind of space became something you could do anything in. It was far bigger than we needed, but it was at a price at that point we could afford. And we filled it with not just furniture, but with a lot of things that went with the furniture. And then it just grew. Like I really believed that, I believe very strongly in the fact that you work and live in a community and you've got to give back. So we used our space for other things. And from those grew bazaars, and from bazaars you found craftsmen, and from that grew the concept of just having a bazaar. So that's really the evolution.
I also want to talk to you a little bit about what you mentioned earlier, that the furniture that you had at Baro, it was never about, fitting into a mold. It was how a customer would make it their own. And that's a very generous sentiment to have as an entrepreneur. Do you want to talk a little bit about what fueled that sort of an idea? Because, you're not doing a cookie cutter piece that would fit into this space and all of that, but you also, in a way, you're engaging with your customer to say, here, this is it. Now you go make it your own.
I think that's really a point of view, and I feel very strongly about design being, there are two parts to design. One is the person who is really an expert and is trained and knows the nuts and bolts of how to create something, whether it's a table or a house or a dress. I mean, you know how to cut, you know how to put it together, and it needs to be ergonomic and fit right. But I don't agree with a very often bandied about thought that the important thing is to let people know that that designer is what you're wearing or what you're sitting on or what's in your house, and the designer wants to put their stamp on whatever. I believe good design is about where you take the excellence of somebody's of an expertise you don't have, and you find a way to infuse into it your own bits and pieces, your own stories. Now, I accept that everybody isn't able to be a designer, but that's where the designer comes in to take your stories and infuse them.
Exactly.
And so, therefore, that followed into what I believed in Baro, that yes, this is a mid-century style chair, and mid-century had a certain kind of feeling and a look. But why can't it have Phulkari if I wanted to tell that story? Or why can't I paint it bright red because that's the color that goes with me? The story of the chair's comfort and its ergonomics won't change, but it becomes a different chair in my home than it would be in your home. You can't invent a new chair for every customer, but you can help them to get what works for them. I believe very strongly in that.
Very beautifully put. Tell me a little bit about how the name Baro came about.
Well, when we were looking for a name, I was quite agnostic about names, and I said, I'm only going to have a veto on something I really don't like. Otherwise, it's so subjective. And my partner Siddharth kept coming up with very esoteric names. Most of them were Urdu or in Hindi, sometimes hard to pronounce. And I kept saying, no way. And he said, why? And I said, I'm telling you from now, I'm not going to say yes to a Hindi name. And he said, why? I said, because I just feel that the Hindi belt has taken over this country. And I can't let that happen. And he said, okay, so then what about a Bengali name? Because 12 was our address and Baro is 12 in Bengali. And Baro just sounds like such a good word.
That it rolls off the tongue well. Yeah.
And then we found so many lovely meanings for Baro later. Over 4 years, people came in. I mean, it ranged from a Korean rock star to the fact that it actually has it's connected to the word pressure and all kinds of things. So it was really nice. And it's a name that everybody thought was very exotic. And everybody in Calcutta, where I grew up from, said, yes.
I think in a way, the universe makes things come together really well, right? I mean, that's the story. I mean, in an age of excess, Baro was very distinct in its appeal. How would you go about setting up a creative experiential design business? It's not easy. And especially now when you have the cookie cutter variety, but how would you end up creating what you did?
Supriya, to tell you the truth, it wasn't a planned, I didn't have a plan of this is how it should go. I really think the biggest strength of Baro was its honesty. It wasn't pretending anything, and we actually believed what we did, or I believe very strongly in the stories we're putting forward. I think that what I've always loved and never had so much in front as I do now is all craft from everywhere. I love craft. I love handmade things. I love the imagination of people who do things that I can't think of. So I've always believed that I really lack imagination. I'm able to look at other people's things and then find a way to put them together, but I can't dream of what they're doing. And so to be able to bring people like that together was a way of presenting different things to people. And I also believe very strongly in things being available to everyone, which means that it needs to be affordable. Now, everything can't be cheap, but it can be sensibly priced. Yeah. If it's sensibly priced, that means, I can't afford that, but maybe I'll save up for it and it's worth getting. Not that's so ridiculous I don't even want to walk into the store. So I think as what you called experiential, it was a combination of being able to meet the people who made the things. So every time we had a bazaar, it was absolutely imperative that the people who created them, the designers or the craftspeople or the artisans, they were there. And they could present it and they could tell you the stories. And the minute you meet someone and you see what they're doing, you then appreciate it much more. I mean, you've not seen, say, a piece of tatha a million times, and to you it's, oh yeah, I mean, it's just another piece of handicraft. Then when someone's telling you what it takes, and you see it, and they're doing a little demo, it just immediately takes on a different thing. And I think what's also very important is that you have to understand the context of everybody's life. And so they're not just going to get pieces of art that fill up walls. If you can make beautiful things that they can use every day and are happy to use and look at every day, it becomes far more successful for them, for the maker, for everyone. And I also think the other important thing is to make an environment that doesn't alienate people or make them feel, oh God, I better not go in there. I mean, art galleries are a lot like that. Very few people go into art galleries because they're so intimidated. So if you can go into a place that says, just come, it's cool. I mean, you don't have to get anything. Come and have a cup of coffee, or if you just hang around. And we really did have a feeling like that. I know, because a lot of people used to come and say, can I just have a meeting here? And say, yeah, sure. And you can I sit on the chair? Yes, put your feet up too, So I think that makes a difference. And it makes you spend more time, and time makes you open to seeing more, and you're relaxing and all of that. I think that's all part of the experience.
What were some of the lessons that you learned while setting up a business like yours?
The lessons are just how this country makes it really, really difficult to be an entrepreneur. It's amazing because there are millions. Every second person on the street is an entrepreneur, but it's a fight against all odds. It's not at all, nothing is ever done to help you. So the biggest lessons are that, you have all the guts, the enthusiasm and the passion for what you're doing, but the stuff that you may not know about that seems standard becomes the biggest challenge. So dealing with legal stuff, dealing with contracts, dealing with accounts, I mean, it's a nightmare. And I don't understand why it should be, but it just is. So that can sometimes really break you. You think, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
But I mean, you find a way. One always finds a way if you're interested enough. But it is hard, very hard. I mean, eventually we had to close Barrow down because of a landlord who didn't think that there was any reason to do something special because of a pandemic. Sure, theoretically, we've agreed on a rent, pay it. But I mean, is the world the same? Do you not see a bigger picture of what could help everyone? So those are the challenges. I remember when I was one of the founders of the Blue Frog, and if we had known that we'd have to have some 80 plus licenses and what it took to get that, we'd never have tried it. We went feet first. So
yeah. I mean, let's talk a little bit about the pandemic and the post-pandemic world. I mean, I know the pandemic has changed a lot of things for a lot of us, and like you mentioned, for you as well. How, and we spoke earlier briefly on the transition into the online space, how has it been towards making something that you've created with love, complete an experiential space, and transitioning online? What have been your key learnings while transitioning to a digital medium? It must not have been easy at all.
No, it's quite strange, because it kind of happened organically in that you're not doing business because you can't do business. You can't go into a shop. What do? Do you shut down completely, or do you do the obvious thing by going online, which you have no option at that time? So you say, okay, well, let's go online. What does it take? Now, we're a small team. We're not a team of techies, and we didn't have bottomless pits to put our hands into to get pockets that were never ending. So what the first lesson is that when you have people who are passionate, they find a way. And I work with a fabulous team of young people, and two of them just went there, learned, and built the website. I'm no good at that because I'm really bad at learning something off a tutorial on a computer, but they're half my age and they prefer doing that. And so it was great because they brought that value. I had another value. So one big lesson is you get a team of diverse people and it really works for you. And diverse ages, I think, work really well with the online business because very obviously it's a much more new age or young people's thing. They know how to do it. They know how to set it up. They speak the language, but you don't want it to be just a cookie cutter. It needs to have a personality, and that personality is what you give it. And so what we've done with Barrow Market actually is exactly what Barrow Market was. And I think that's probably something I brought to it because that's what I am and the way I feel. But most importantly for me is the understanding that there are two ways to treat online in sales or online markets. One is where the world is online and you think I can get anything there. So whatever you're looking for, you Google and you get it. So, I mean, the way Google is used is like people, it's almost like people, it's like Kodak or like Band-Aid. You just Google and you find it.
You Google it, yeah.
So, and that you're not going to a shop, you're looking for something. So you want a particular pair of scissors or you want a particular, dryer. And so you go and you find it. The other is when you want to go to a store, the store's shut and you can't take a car there because there's a pandemic, but the store is now available online. So it's the store you're going to. It just happens to be online. So I like to think that that's what we're doing. We're using the convenience of a new medium, but we're trying to make that medium be what we want it to be. And of course there are limitations, but then there are also lots of extras you get that you didn't get when you reach more people, you can tell things better, whatever. There are pros and cons, but what we're working at is to try and make it into a place that feels like you're walking into the Barrow Market. So apart from the curation of what we have, which is clearly different. It's also, adding to it personalized messages, the same kind of, emails or WhatsApp messages we sent out. We do the same thing. We reach out to people. And another big thing is we realize, and I've realized in the 1 month we've been there, that there's a whole world who will go online, look at it, and say lovely, but they don't want to, they just don't want to click. They'll call you and say, now will you get all this for me? And can you send it? And there's no, it's not about bargaining. It's not about making it cheaper, nothing. It's just about, I prefer a human being. So in our first month, we had equal sales online and offline off the website. And so I think that's an important way of understanding that people still want touch and feel. And they accept that there's a limitation to the time and what it can do, but we don't want to lose that. And we hope that we will get back to that and then just have it all, have every option available.
I think it's also dehumanizing after a while, like how much of digital information can you keep consuming at some point, especially when you're buying, let's talk about the curation after this, but when you're looking at buying something for yourself or for your home, you do want someone at the other end, especially if you can't go and visit the space, to give you that sort of tangible information saying, hey, listen, this is what it's all about. Because otherwise, there's no fun in that. clicking it, it'll come into another packet. There's no joy to all of those things.
And I think fundamentally the thing about anything digital is you very rarely just go wandering around just to find. You go looking for something. Whereas if you walked into a store and I went to buy a chair in Baro, I might end up buying, 3 saris and 4 boxes of something and flowers and whatever else, because they were there and I just wondered. Now it's very different online. You don't necessarily wonder like that.
You're a great colorist, from your home to the curation of your objects. Tell me a little bit about how you go about choosing, curating, objects for your store online right now. And you're a very unique eye. So how does all of that come together where you give a little bit of yourself now to Baro Market online?
I don't know. I think it's just instinct. I'm not a trained design artist, colorist, nothing. I think it's born obviously out of interest. It's born out of the way I've lived. I think everything that your life experience is what introduces you to new things. Everything you've read or eaten or traveled or been or read, all of that. And I've always been interested in craft because it just attracts me. And I think once I started doing things like getting different designers or craftspeople together and it spreads, then people come to you. You no longer have to go searching so much as people are coming to you and you can see things. So you get flooded all the time with email and stuff like that. And how do I choose? I try to do a couple of things. I try to make, first of all, everything I have to really love. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. It's like, if it's, okay, then don't put it on because there's enough to love. And then I try and make sure that they're all small batch, real designers. They're not pretending to be, they're not saying, this is all handmade, but actually it's all being, mass produced somewhere. So we're actually working with people who are interested and you can talk to, and we will, if we're given a choice, we'll always choose the smaller or the more unknown so that they have a platform, not because it's wrong to be known, but because if you can give more people a platform, why not? And we try and look for more unusual things. So things people don't get in most places. So, try and find things that give it a much wider variety. And of course, look for things that are sensibly priced. There are many beautiful things that cost the earth, and I don't know where the right place to put it on. So for now, I'd rather be within a kind of bracket of cost that makes people feel completely comfortable, So it's a combination of things like that.
What are some, sorry.
No, go on. For color in India, you don't have to think about it. It just is there. I think the whole concept of we must wear black or you must have this monochromatic is just alien to India.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the greatest things to celebrate the color, and there's so many different ways to celebrate it and so many ways it's there. So you don't have to try hard.
What are some of the products that you stock on Baro Market? Do you want to shed some light for viewers who just logged in?
Yeah, so the Baro Market is the kind of place, it's a market where you can literally go in and get something for anybody of any age. what would you shop for there? You'd shop for presents, you'd shop for clothes, you'd shop for things for your home, for whimsical things, for children, all kinds of stuff. But fundamentally, what you'd find are things that you're not likely to get in most places, things that always tell a story. And the story is always something that's special and fascinating. And if you were looking, say, for something for a child, instead, and yes, okay, it's going to be a toy, but you don't have to have a toy that's just something bought from a massive store that goes all over the world. You could get a doll that's made by a company called Silai Wali, and these are all Afghan refugee women in Delhi who work with fabric that's left over from designers, and these beautiful dolls, absolutely gorgeous dolls that adults love too. Each one of them is a different racial type, and they come in a box with their own bedding or whatever. They're just beautiful. So you could get that, or you could get a puzzle which is created by Airdrome, and it's a puzzle that is a jigsaw puzzle, but it also becomes a picture for your wall. Or you could get a fabulous artist book. It's a limited edition book that's called The Tiger Who Loves Spots. And that's written by an artist called Prashant Miranda, and he's illustrated it. And it's just the most wonderful book for kids that adults love too. I mean, I love the book.
Yeah.
So, that's what I mean. You go in and you get a whole choice of things, and at a price range that starts where I think we have cards, botanical cards at 30 rupees.
Wow.
And it's up from there. So it's, really, I have to say, really lovely things.
So do you ever sleep? I mean, when you're trying to curate all of this, do you ever, I mean, it sounds like a creative chaos of putting all of these things together. So do you ever have time out?
I think time out is relative. It's never time off. It's never time off, but there's time out. Things merge into one another. And I think this kind of stuff, when you're looking and you love and whatever you're doing, you find something. You go into a meeting and you find something. You go on a holiday, you find something. But when you start something, I can tell you, like right now, you're head cook and bottle washer, and you have no time out at all.
What have been your, biggest lessons during this pandemic? I mean, besides all of this and transitioning online, what has been your biggest lesson for yourself that you've learned?
I think the biggest lesson is that there is only one way, and that's forward. Because if you think of the what if, or if only, oh no, this has happened, that's it, you're done. But whatever happens, whatever tragedy, disaster, good, bad, anything, there's no point in getting into a funk or getting stuck in something about that. The only way, and I think that's my producer background, it's like, what's the solution? And
you got to make it work. Yeah.
Make it work. What's the solution? How to go forward? What's the best way to do it? So managing a disaster is one of the most important lessons I learned as a producer. And that's, I think, what the best thing anybody could learn out of this pandemic. What do we do with this? How do we go forward?
And what advice would you give to small business owners?
I think the biggest thing I think you can do is be honest and be practical. Just when I say be honest about what your expectations are, about what you're offering, about what you can do, about all of that. And if you're honest, then it's difficult to suddenly be surprised that something went bad, or I didn't know this. And if you're sensible with where you peg what you can do, and don't think that, in 60 days, I'm going to be bought out for $25 billion, then you're working on something that is doable, and take one step at a time, especially at this time. Go with the flow, figure out who knows where this world is going. I don't believe anybody does. What and how long is it going to take for things to be like we knew, or there's a new, whatever it is. So find a way that you can adapt. So I think that's the most important thing you could do.
Very well put. I'm going to take in some of the viewer questions that have come in. The first one is by Meenakshi, and she says, you've collaborated with a lot of folk artists and artisans. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience?
Okay, so I've known a lot of these artists for a very long time, long before Baro. And I met them through a friend, or a lady who was one of the founders of the Paramparik Karigar, Anu Surabji, and she was really generous in her explaining to me a lot about the art, introducing me to it and to the artists. And one of the things I realized is that they've been exploited a whole lot by a lot of people. And the minute you have their trust, then you can do anything with them. And I've been in a place where a lot of these artists are people I now know well. They trust me completely. And what that means is that I can push them artistically too. So I can, so for example, you have, a Patachitra artist whose work is phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. But when I try to explain to him that there are only so many Jagannaths or so many Ganeshas that he can actually have people want, what about trying something else? At first he'll be skeptical, and then he'll get what it is and he'll try something, and you show him appreciation, other people show him appreciation, and then he just wants to do anything. So working with artists and getting them to use their skill and showing that you are not appreciating it, or not saying, this is rubbish, do something else, but you're just going with it and adapting it to stuff. I think that's one of the best things that I've been able to do with a lot of the artists and craftspeople we work with.
There's a question here from Dia. How difficult was it to make a career switch after having worked in one field as producing for such a long time? Can you tell us about how you made this transition?
I think difficult, Dia, is based on you, on how difficult you want it to be. And I think if I take my 25 years in production, the first 10 were just the best time of my life. It was fantastic. The next 8 were good, but it was beginning to get a little dodgy because advertising was changing, where everything was about celebrities, and the creative message was just irritating. And the next 7 I really disliked. I stayed in it for other reasons of loyalty, business, etc. with the people that I worked with. And I disliked it intensely because I had no respect. I had no respect for the people I was working with. And I thought, just making money is not my reason to do something. So how did the transition happen? Because I was in that state, and Siddharth, my partner at Baro, who was an art director, and I had hired him on a job and we were together, and he was, complaining about what he was doing. And in that conversation, our decision to experiment is what happened. How difficult was it to actually give up? I think that's a very personal decision. And one of them is based on your answering honestly, how much do I want to do something because I need it to pay me and that's paying me, or because I want to do what I want? And I understand that decision at many times or points of your life will be, I need the money. But I was at the stage of my life where I could say, no, that's not the most important thing. And I chose to do it. So, that's what it takes.
Inspiring. It's really, it gives you food for thought, right? In terms of how you want to align yourself with your priorities at that stage in life.
And it helps when you don't have children, when you don't have, when you've already been working, all that helps. But those are decisions, they weren't accidental.
There's a question here from Nishikant Singh. Are you looking for new collaborations with other brands right now? Is there a unique strategy you've developed now in these times, since the online space is inundated with already too much?
We get brands all the time getting in touch with us. Sometimes I find things that are lovely and I seek them out. And of course, we want to keep adding things. I know the online world is completely, it's full and bursting at the seams, but the whole world was. It's not like it's different. Yeah. And I think clearly there's a space for everything. How big the space is, I want it to be the biggest in the world. It may be, it may not be that, but I will still try and keep it unique and honest to what we want to do. And I honestly believe that what we have at Baro Market is not different from what we had at the Baro when it was Baro, in its brick and mortar state. And what I'm trying to make sure is that it will always have the feeling of the stories or the headspace of feeling like you're talking to me, or you're talking to one of the girls, or anybody who you met, you're just meeting them online. And we try and make sure there's always the offline line alive, so that you never feel that, gosh, this is just a computer you're talking to.
Yeah, there has to be some connect, some synergy. Yeah. There's a question here from Soumya Goel. Do you feel post-pandemic has brought a new market for experiential businesses? As a design student, I'm analyzing the market related to what the customers are seeking after such a long time post-lockdown.
I don't know. I don't know how to answer this. I don't have enough experience or knowledge of the whole, mass out there. I mean, I also hear about how if Zara goes on sale, there's a stampede, whether it's pandemic or not. Now that's not experiential. That's Zara, right? So people still want it. And at the same time, I know that there's a big, there's a big Zara everywhere for local and handmade. Now, are these true, or are these just things that people have decided are the things to sell? I don't know. I do know that what we're doing is stuff that's been there. We went online because we had to. So we didn't look for a platform and get onto it. This is what we offer, and this is what we want to do. And this is what I hope more and more people will be excited by and find ways to incorporate into their own life. And I'd love to be able to discover hundreds of more designers. I mean, there's no limit to what you can have. Yeah.
There's a question here from Bhuvan Chaudhary that says, according to you, what would the future of experiential retail shopping look like?
I think there will always be a huge need and a huge space for an actual experiential space, for a place where you walk into and you touch and you feel. No matter how important online is going to be and will stay, you cannot take away from the fact that eventually we are human beings who like other human beings and want to talk to them and want to see, and no matter how beautifully something is photographed, it's never the same as what it looks like when you hold it in your hand or you touch it. So what is the future going to be? I hope and I pray and I dream that the future will be beautiful places you can go into and just feel, God, this is heaven. I want my life to be like this,
There's a question here from Parijat Biswas. If we want to retail with Baro, can we do it? If it's a new brand of handmade clothing, how do we approach it?
Just write to info@baromarket.in. That's all you have to do. I answer that, don't worry.
There's one more. And also for how does one collaborate with you for paintings? Since the gentleman who's written this is a textile artist.
The same. You write into info@baromarket.in with what you do. And with art, I have a very subjective thing about art, clearly, because it's my opinion, but it has to be somebody's. And I try and make sure that the art we're presenting is clearly different from what you get somewhere else. So it's not a comment on it not being good, because there's no such thing as good or bad art. It's purely subjective. But it is art that I think is in the headspace of trying to show something that's a little bit different. So whether it is folk art that we're dealing with that doesn't get enough of a platform, or in the contemporary space, things that I think are really cool, really nice, really affordable, and not easily available anywhere else. So just to warn you in case you think, oh God, I've said you don't have space for you and it's horrible. That's not true.
There's another question here that says, the person asking, I want to start a small business, but whenever I think of it, it already exists. So how does one get that uniqueness in a brand?
So if you're saying you wanted to start a business, but everything you thought of was already there, that means what your intention is to start a business. So I don't know how to answer that, because then you have to think of something that the world hasn't thought of yet. But if you already know something that have something that you're really passionate about and how to convert that into a business, then you have to think of unique ways to present it. If you're looking for an idea that could be a great business idea, I mean, think of something that you really like, or your friends or whatever really like and can't get easily, or would like in another way, whether it's, how do you put bhel puri into a business model that works. So you have to think of something, and then that's the way to build a business.
There's another question here from Devanshi Pal. What was the first thought or first inspiration before starting Baro Market? What gave you the confidence and the assurity that yes, you should give it a shot and start Baro?
Okay, I'm just distinguishing here between Baro and Baro Market. The Baro Market was born in Baro. So how that happened was because we had the space, and we started curating these bazaars that would be for a weekend or sometimes a little longer, and they were always themed. And this is something that I actually started when I was at the Blue Frog. I was one of the founders of the Blue Frog, and to use the space in the non-party time, in the daytime, I curated a whole lot of pop-ups that were always themed. So whether they were fashion, or it was Christmas, or it was furniture design, or there were different things, and they were really successful because people were looking for loved being introduced to something that was different that you couldn't get. So that actually went into what the Baro Market was, which was themes of different design. So we did, whether it was Delhi production designers, or it was Bengal craft, or it was again Christmas, or things like from Jaipur, they were always themed. So there was something there that made sense. It wasn't just a crazy bazaar. And you'd come in there and you'd always meet the people who were making it and what they were doing. And, we didn't have thousands of people like you'd have at maybe bazaars that are in Bombay, but you had hundreds of people who really were engaged, and everybody who came and left with things that they took, and every single one of the people who participated, who we invited, they all commented that they never had an audience like this, and an audience that came there because they wanted to hear the stories and be part of it. So I think that's what made it clear that there was a place for Baro Market in the world. And if we had to shut down, then what could we do? And therefore the transition to online. So that's kind of the way it all happened.
There is a last question here that says, how do you ensure giving customer the ideal experience? How important is this?
Oh, it's the most important thing, because if you don't have a good experience, no matter how good a product is, you're unlikely to buy it, or you'll never come back. And that experience really comes from, I think, it's about who you are. Now, if I think the people who put together Baro Market, the team we are, it's about developing relationships, about sharing stories. So we want to talk to you about it being, we want to be professional, but we also want it to be not intimidating and casual. So it's professionally done, where things are done right, but at the same time can come and have a cup of coffee when we had the store, or even now we're online. But if you really find it tedious, or you just don't want to do it, here's a number, and you don't have to be my friend. You can be a stranger. There's a number on the screen for anyone, and you can call, and a person speaks to you, helps you through, will suggest things. I mean, we even do things like somebody ringing and saying, I need a present to go somewhere tomorrow, and I want to spend 2,000 rupees. Will you give me a hamper? And we do it, and they love it. So it's stuff like that. You just develop relationships. I think that's the most critical thing. People need to feel that they're being appreciated or important, and you're spending time on them, and then you can do anything with them. You can even make mistakes.
Thank you so much, Srila. This was so refreshing to hear, and made more power to you for everything that you're doing with Baro Market.
Thank you. Lovely to talk to you. Thank you, Etsy.
Sunanda, over to you.
Thank you so much, Srila. It was so inspiring to listen to you. And
get shopping now.
Get shopping. Baromarket.in.
So like a must visit when we are in Bombay also, right? So Priya, I think I'm definitely going to be there. Thank you so much.
Well, Sunanda, we don't have a Baro right now that you can come to. I'd be happy to meet you and have a cup of coffee, but right now you have to go online. Cross our fingers and hope it will be soon that we can actually have a space that you can come to.
Absolutely. I hope that happens soon. It was great to listen to you. Thank you so much for joining. And thank you so much, Supriya, for being such an amazing host as always.
Yes, Supriya, lovely to talk to you and to have an intelligent conversation.
Thank you so much, audience, for listening. Of course, we have our next session coming up on Saturday, which will be about how to create an online business of DIY products. Do tune in. You know how to do that. You just have to go to our Instagram page and register on the form. Thanks a lot once again to everyone for watching Small Talk with the Etsy Collective. It's always great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. See you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.